Hello, hello, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us live this evening. I'm Karen and I'm joined by Hannah live. And we're here to share with you some of our thoughts about helping a child with Down syndrome to communicate emotions. Emotions are a huge talking point at the moment. Actually, when we planned our presentation for you this evening, we didn't know that we were going to be having the announcement of lockdown number 2. But I think actually it's probably quite timely that we are talking about this evening. Just a couple of things to mention. If you are joining us live, please do let us know by putting comments and to say that you're watching #live. If you have got any questions, please feel free to type them out as we go through the presentation. We'll try to have a look through them as we're presenting, but if we don't get a chance to, then we will be coming back in to answer questions individually afterwards. And if you're catching this on replay, as I'm sure many people will be doing, please still put a #replay, and then we'll be able to know that you've been to watch. And also, again, if you have any questions, it's absolutely fine to still ask questions after the live has finished, and we'll come back in again to answer as best we can.
Okay. I'm really, really pleased to be here this evening, and really looking forward to talking with everybody. And I'm going to have a little start by going through the presentation, and after I've had a talk for a while, then we've got a little video to show you, and then Karen's going to chip in. So lots of really interesting material to share with you, and we hope you find it really useful. Okay, so you may be a parent who has a child with Down syndrome, or perhaps you are an adult working in the education system with a child with Down syndrome. Although we're going to focus very much on emotions and how to support children with Down syndrome to communicate their emotions, I just thought it'd be helpful just to set a starting point of just summarising what Down syndrome is. Some of you joining tonight may be less familiar. Perhaps it's a new diagnosis for your child, or you haven't worked much in the field of supporting children with Down syndrome before. So this is just a very short summary of what Down syndrome is. So Down syndrome is a genetic condition where a child is born with an extra chromosome. There are different types of Down syndrome, but basically they all involve a difference in DNA. Children with Down syndrome have learning difficulties, and these vary from being mild to moderate. Each child can learn, but how much and how fast is what varies. Another key aspect of Down syndrome is that children do have different physical features, for example, their face, hands and feet, but there is no specific look. So what we actually know from research is that children look much more like their own family than they do other children with Down syndrome. And of course, they are children first. They are their own person first. So they've all got their own personality and interests. So there's no sort of real generalising about the nature of a personality of a child with Down syndrome, or the details of what their strengths are, or the difficulties they may have. But there are some general themes that we know are true for this particular condition. And many children with Down syndrome have associated health conditions such as low muscle tone in their body, which can affect their motor skills and their ability to engage in physical activities. Children with Down syndrome often have heart defects, and they may have difficulty with hearing or eyesight. However, despite these additional complications, the life expectancy of an individual with Down syndrome is now 60 years plus, and this is largely due to a better understanding of the condition, as well as better healthcare. Many children with Down syndrome attend mainstream schools. It's not a case that a child with Down syndrome has to be in a specialist provision. Some do, some don't. It's very much a personal choice of the parents. But children with Down syndrome are able to thrive in mainstream education if their specific learning profile is understood and teaching is adapted appropriately. So that's a very short overview of what is Down syndrome. So on to the topic now of what we're going to be talking about this evening. What are the emotional needs of children with Down syndrome? We're going to think about how to support children to communicate their emotions. We need to understand any particular issues for children with Down syndrome. Well, to start off with, actually, the big message to share with you is that children with Down syndrome feel emotions just the same as any other child. So the actual emotions they experience are just the same. They might get angry, they might feel happy, excited, sad, worried, lonely, scared, all and anything that you can think of that any child will experience. So does a child with Down syndrome. There's no difference there. However, a child with Down syndrome, their ability to recognise emotions and understand them does develop slower, and this can have an impact in terms of their social interaction. However, they can learn to recognise emotions. It's just a bit behind for their age as they progress through childhood. And because of the profile of a child with Down syndrome and the difficulties they tend to have with thinking and language, it can make it harder for them to recognise, understand and manage their emotions. So in younger children, for example, we might find younger children with Down syndrome have more frequent and intense tantrums, often because they're finding it really hard to communicate if they're feeling confused or to be able to express they need help with something. So in understanding children with Down syndrome and the way they perceive and experience emotions, what's helpful to think about is that they have a unique executive functioning profile. So what do I mean by executive function? Well, there's a part of your brain at the front of your brain, it's called the prefrontal cortex, and this is like a control station in your brain, and it's what enables you to plan, organise, to achieve your goals, and also, crucially, to regulate your emotions. This is basically what executive functioning is, and executive function is generally slower to develop in children with Down syndrome, though there are areas of relative strength, which is something that's important to think about. So I'd like to look at 3 areas of executive function this evening that are particularly important for understanding the emotional needs of children with Down syndrome. So the first is about emotional control. So this is the ability to respond to feelings, to be able to have a sense of control of what we might say or do in response to something that we feel. Now, this is an area of relative strength for children with Down syndrome. So although it might still be an area of delay for their age, in terms of their overall executive function and ability to regulate their emotions, it's something that is typically a bit stronger for them. So this means that they are able to label and to understand emotions. And if we can develop a child's communication skills, then it's going to be easier for them to tap into that emotional control, that aspect of executive function, so that they can really utilise it to manage situations better. And I know that Karen's going to talk a bit more about ways to support children in communicating their emotions later on. One area that children with Down syndrome do have particular difficulty is in their ability to adapt their behaviour and thoughts to new ideas or change. And this is called shifting. And it's an area where children with Down syndrome have particular difficulty during the primary school years. So it actually decreases a bit their capability of shifting their perspective and taking on board opinions and new ideas and being able to accept that there might need to be a change is something that is a particular struggle. And if you have a little look at the diagram on the slide, I've just put this in to give you a bit of a sense of the cycle that a child with Down syndrome might get stuck in. If you think about the fact that there might be a difficult situation that then causes them to experience emotions, whilst they are capable of learning self-calm strategies and we can support them in doing that, what might happen is that when they have calmed down and they're then being supported to reflect on and consider a situation, and being asked to maybe take a different perspective and consider a different point of view, this is something they're going to struggle with, and they might get a bit stuck. And so what happens is the difficult situation doesn't seem to change for them, and then they go back into that cycle where the emotions then come back, and they're going round and round. So it's one reason why children with Down syndrome can become really easily frustrated, and it's quite important that we think about ways we not only teach children with Down syndrome to manage these situations, but crucially how we can continue to provide that ongoing support. So whether you're a parent or an educator, the child with Down syndrome may be able to learn and to understand different techniques that you teach them after having lots of modelling and practice, but they're likely to continue to need that modelling and prompting and support, certainly throughout primary school in particular, in being able to actually apply those strategies. And again, communication is really, really crucial for this, and something that we will be thinking about in a few moments. The third area I wanted to look at is something called inhibition. So it's hard for children with Down syndrome to be able to stop and control their behaviour at appropriate times. In terms of where they are developmentally compared to their peers, this really varies throughout childhood. Typically, it will be a bit delayed, and sometimes it's going to be worse than others, and it'll be very individual to each child's development. But again, the communication skills are going to be key, because they're going to give the child ways to express their feelings instead of responding and showing them physically. Just before we move on, I just thought it'd be helpful just to briefly outline the other areas of executive function that this prefrontal cortex is responsible for. The first is planning and organisation, and this is often an area of difficulty for children with Down syndrome. Another area is something called working memory. This is your capacity to hold information in the mind to be able to complete a task or make a response. And we're thinking here not just in terms of responding to a learning situation, but actually being able to keep information in mind to respond in a social situation or one where we're feeling quite emotional. And here, visual aids are really, really helpful. Another area of executive function is in relation to slower processing. So again, not just about learning, but also about the time it would take a child with Down syndrome to make sense of their feelings and then be able to communicate them as well. So we need to be aware of this to understand that if a child might not respond initially to what we say or do in trying to support them, it might be just that they just might need a bit of time to process and just to try and make sense of things. And again, thinking visually is helpful. So our brains continue to develop and acquire new skills throughout life, and this is the same for children with Down syndrome. And if we use strategies that are suited to a Down syndrome brain, then we can help children to learn to communicate and manage their emotions more effectively. That is a little introduction for you in terms of what Down syndrome is and some of the emotional needs that children with Down syndrome experience, and the reasons behind that being to do with those difficulties and delays in executive functioning skills. In a moment, I know Karen's going to give you some wonderful strategies that you can use, but first I'm going to play a video. I'm going to bring Karen back on to the screen with us, and Karen, I think we wanted to have a mention of and introduce this video.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Hannah. I've learned a lot. I don't know about those of you who are watching this video. I find it absolutely fascinating. Bringing different people from different professional backgrounds together is also always a great learning opportunity. So in this next slide where we've got the video, I think this is where us as professionals learn the most, and it's because our kind of guest expert, if you like, and I'm using the word expert with absolute sincerity, because I'm Ian Richardson, who is going to be talking to us. He is a dad of a child with Down syndrome. And as parents, you are the experts in your own children and really the ones who get to know your child's needs and kind of what helps them the most. So I think it's amazing that we've got this opportunity. So thank you so much to Ian when you get a chance to watch this. Really grateful for your contribution tonight. And yeah, let's sit back and listen to Ian's video. Thanks, Hannah.
Hi, my name's Ian, and I've been asked just to chat briefly about our experiences from a speech and language point of view. For our son, so Aaron is 8 years old, and has Down syndrome, and everything is a bit delayed, particularly speech. If we think about some of the challenges that Aaron's had in communicating, particularly around communicating emotions, he'll struggle to find the words to recognise exactly what he's feeling. So we might use some visual stuff to kind of help him with that. He will do things like he'll just say he's fine, except you can just tell by looking at him that he's not fine. And I think if it was other folks other than us, sometimes struggle to get that he's not fine, if that makes sense. But the things that have maybe helped a bit with that are kind of quite general strategies. So we know that with Down syndrome, he needs space and time to process. And to think about what his answer to something might be, or to think about what it is he wants to say. If it was emotions or anything, he'll need that space. And there's a big need to go to have the confidence to just ask him a question and take a step back. And give him that time and that space to process stuff. That's massively helpful. I think we've got to go so easy on him as well. And what we've noticed in lockdown is so since the beginning of March, his speech language has just rocketed up. It's been incredible to see the growth. I think in school, so he has been in a mainstream school, and we are now homeschooling him permanently. But he has been in a mainstream school, and I think because it was largely task-oriented, so we know that he would be spending more than an hour sat at a table outside a classroom doing task stuff, and they would mix it up a bit, but it would be quite intensive time doing that, and that's really exhausting for him. So then when they're doing that, they will be working with speech and language therapists, and they will be putting really good stuff in place there. But actually, what has happened, which is really important to happen, is that never then has filtered through into the classroom. So the things, and so those kind of strategies about just giving him the space and the structure he needs to kind of figure stuff out himself, that never kind of filters through into the classroom. In our experience, it hasn't. That's massively important. But then it has to filter through into the rest of the school and become a whole culture thing as well. So whatever scenario he's in, that's been a massive one. He's also needed to be told that it's okay for him to not feel okay, and that's very much a work in progress. He's not massively grasping that, but just holding him and reassuring him that things are okay, and it's okay to feel what he's feeling. And if are you sad? And we'll say if we're feeling sad, we'll talk about it a little bit. But he just seems to want to jump straight back into being fine. He just wants everything to be fine. So again, that's slowing down, giving him the time and the reassurance and some physical contact, if that's appropriate, is for Aaron, to just breathe and go, just feel what you're feeling. I think that would, from our limited experience, that would be maybe what we would suggest. Yeah, I think that's probably it. He's just that he needs reassurance, and I think children who are struggling to communicate what they're feeling just need to know that it's okay to feel what they're feeling. Yeah, that's us. Hi, my name's Ian.
Oh, I just love that. I love that it's okay to feel what you're feeling. I think it applies to every child, to every adult, everyone everywhere right now. I think we all need to hear that it's okay to feel how we're feeling. But I love that insight from Ian, and I just think it's wonderful to hear a parent talking about what they found works really, really well.
Absolutely. And that comment about just that extra time and space really struck me. I also do a lot of work supporting children and young people with autism, who often also find that they take a little bit longer to process information, and just that slowing down, that pace of life that lockdown has provided, one of the positives really, seems to have been really helpful, and I think lots of people have benefited from that slowing down, additional time to process. And I think the other thing that I picked out particularly is that default kind of "I'm fine." That's something that I've seen a lot, and even as adults, we're guilty. We do the same, don't we? We say we're fine and we don't really think about it. But supporting people to express their emotions and really think about it and take that time to respond is a really important lesson, as actually for all of us, but particularly so for children with additional needs. So I'm going to move on to the communication part now. So when I think about communication skills in the context of a child with Down syndrome, one of the first things that is often present, and I'm going to talk in kind of often and typically and usually, because I recognise that, of course, every child with Down syndrome is completely different to the next child, because we're all unique, but just for the purpose of the presentation. So the first thing is that there's often a real mismatch between understanding and expression. So a child with Down syndrome is much more likely to understand language before they're able to express that same kind of language themselves. And that goes for vocabulary around emotions and feelings, as it does with other aspects of language. So they might understand when someone says the words happy or frustrated or worried, but not have that same vocabulary in their expressive box to be able to use. So that's important, and it's useful for us to bear that in mind when we're trying to help a child to learn about emotions. It's not to assume that they don't understand just because they're not expressing themselves. The second point, which is really common, is having visual strengths. So predominantly, children and young people with Down syndrome will have a much better chance of understanding information if it's presented visually than if it is presented verbally. So every time you're presenting a particularly new information, new ideas, new concepts, such as the vocabulary around emotions and feelings, if it's something that your child or child you support is struggling with, really think about how you can do that in a visual way, so that you're playing to the child's communication strengths rather than forcing them to use information channels which may not be so strong. Particularly if a child's got additional hearing difficulties, then that visual strength will really help them. They also tend to have social strengths, so which is useful when it comes to understanding and expressing our emotions, because our emotions are all in context. Usually as a response to things within a social situation. And the way we express our emotions and our feelings is also part and parcel of our social communication and interaction with others. So another thing is that if we reduce our spoken language input, what that does is helps to minimise the load on the working memory. So often working memory and kind of the ability to retain long strings of information is impaired. It's not the child's strength. So the way that we can help is by reducing the amount of spoken language that we use at any given time. That's not to say that we have to use really, really simplistic language and vocabulary. It's just thinking about the length of our sentences, how many kind of key words or pieces of information we're giving at a time. And then also going back to that one of the key messages from Ian is allowing that processing time after we have given any language input, spoken language input, to give the child a chance to process, think, and then respond. And the final thing on this slide I wanted to highlight was being mindful of environmental impacts. So communication, for it to really be effective, whether that's for understanding of language and communication or whether that's expressing ourselves, we need to have a number of other things kind of settled or regulated or in place first. So a couple of those things include sensory information. So if a child is particularly sensitive to sensory information and they're in a really busy, noisy, active environment, their ability to process language and communication will not be so good as if they are in a quiet place. And another thing that may affect environmentally is kind of how organised and familiar the environment is too. So the kind of structure that's in place, that can help or hinder, depending on how well organised and supportive it is for a child too. And then finally, I kind of include in this point would be what else is going on for the child at that time. So for all of us, if we've not had a good night's sleep and so we're tired, or if we're hungry or thirsty, or we're in any kind of pain or discomfort, our communication skills are not at their optimum. And so thinking about, where is my child at right now? Are they able to understand what I'm talking about? Are they able to express how they're feeling right now? Or do we need to work on some of the other things, some of the environmental things, to support them first so that we can focus on the communication? Because if we're not in a nice, calm, regulated state, communication of any kind is difficult, and that's for all of us as well. It's not just for a child with Down syndrome, but particularly communication around our emotions and feelings are very difficult if we are not calm and regulated. Okay, so moving on.
Before we move on, Karen, there's been a couple of interesting comments, people reflecting on the impacts of lockdown and the use of technology and how that has been affecting their children with Down syndrome. I just wondered if you had any thoughts from a speech and language perspective on that sort of sense of struggling to understand and to communicate when things become virtual and online.
Use of online communication like Zoom, and we're obviously coming to you live in a Facebook group tonight. It's fantastic if you've got the ability to understand language and communication really well, you don't have any difficulties, but there's a lot that gets lost as a result. So when we're kind of live with people in person, we can pick up on, if we go back to some of the strengths in the profile, and also, some of the things you mentioned at the beginning, Hannah, just about knowing what we know about Down syndrome. Social strengths, as much as we might try online, a lot of social interaction is through kind of in context. So being able to see what else is going on in the room is really helpful. Those extra visual clues that are completely absent when you're just seeing a headshot someone on the screen, that's difficult. And also being able to read facial expressions, it's not as easy at all when you're on. And also depending on how the interaction is set up, if it's one-to-one, it's slightly easier. But if there's kind of a group situation, not being able to use your imitation skills, which you might be quite good at, to see how other people are responding and what they're doing. If you're only able to see the person who's talking, that can really impact as well.
Quite a lot of challenges then during lockdown, added challenges that we may not sort of been able to sort of predict or weren't necessarily expecting, and it's probably been quite tough navigating that. I'm really looking forward to hearing your next slide, which is full of these practical strategies. This is what we want.
I'm just going to pick up on another comment about considering interoception also, absolutely, as part of the sensory needs. Interoception is absolutely key. If you're not familiar with the term interoception, it's about understanding our feelings inside our bodies. So those kind of basic feelings of hunger, thirst, pain, as well as all of our feelings, our emotions. If you have got difficulties with even knowing what that feels like inside your body, how are you able to then kind of start mapping on words, vocabulary, and being able to express that with others? That's a massive challenge. Absolutely. Thank you for that comment. It's a really, really useful one. So ways to help, in one slide, there's obviously lots of different things that can help. Ian gave us a couple of ideas of things that have worked for them in their home, and there will be lots of other ways which can help, and obviously with different helpful strategies, different things work for different people, but these are some of the things that I've seen be effective quite frequently, so that's what I'm going to share with you. So first of all, think about teaching the vocabulary, teaching what the emotions are first. So in a kind of a one-to-one setting, we're going to have some time, and we're going to set out to actually teach. So it's an intentional thing. It's often one-on-one, and you might be using like some kind of program that you're following. So you're going to teach the emotions first until the child has some kind of demonstrates an understanding of the different concepts, the different vocabulary involved in feelings or emotions. And then you're going to need lots and lots of time to allow the child or your child to rehearse what they've learned. So this can be, if the teaching was in a one-to-one situation, the rehearsing could be perhaps in a small group, within the family home. It could be into the classroom if it's in school. And it's not expecting the child at this point to be understanding and using and expressing themselves around their feelings and emotions in a really kind of sophisticated way. We're still going to be expecting them to make mistakes, to maybe not be identifying how they're feeling, and kind of need that support and that kind of scaffold in place, that prompting sometimes. And when they've had lots and lots of opportunity to rehearse, then they can begin to actually apply their language for emotions. So I would use this process for lots of different aspects of communication, not just for emotions, but the same would apply for emotions. So making sure that we're actually doing the teaching first, then we give opportunities to rehearse that's supported, and then we can actually start to apply it kind of out in the real world, as it were. My second tip would be make it visual. Whatever we're doing, when it comes to communication, the more visual we can make it, the easier it's going to be, not just for understanding the concepts, but also for supporting that processing time. Visual information is much more permanent than spoken information, which disappears as soon as we've said it. So visual information could be in lots of different ways. So it could be through images, symbols, pictures, or it could be with text, depending on whether your child is reading, or it might be both. So I've just popped a really simple image on the slide of some examples of widely used symbols for emotions. I've just noted a comment. What do you mean by rehearsing? How would that look in a small group activity? So rehearsing would be perhaps you've been learning about the feeling happy. Let's start with happy, and what happy might feel like, in terms what it might look like on your face, what it might look like in your body. You might be learning about different situations or things or people that make you happy. Then a way of rehearsing that would be to be able to kind of approach different people who might ask the question, oh, how are you feeling? Oh, you look happy, you know, like, are you? And the child might then say, I feel happy. And then, oh, wow, yes, I can tell you're happy because I can see that you're smiling, and supporting them to kind of elaborate and expand to really demonstrate understanding of the concept. If they're not able to say that they feel happy when they obviously look happy, and they've been able to reveal it in a teaching situation, then that's when the support and the scaffold would come in. You might play games involving the emotions that have been taught, lots of different ways. The idea of rehearsing is that it's kind of a practice, and it's something that might need to be done in the same way lots and lots of different times before it kind of sinks in and the child gets it. I hope that's of some help to explain what I mean. So moving on to learning in context. So emotions don't just happen on a piece of paper with a picture, or with a label. You know, happy, the word isn't an emotion. It's a feeling. I've seen someone commenting, I'm not sure, I can't see where I am now, whether it's the same person, but around that interoception, and that kind of wondering if it's possibly also a delay in that being able to feel what's going on inside your body and identifying those feelings, quite possibly. So learning in context, so learning through play. You know, acting out, role play, play with miniatures or different characters that you might have, learning through video. So video is a great way of teaching the communication around feelings, because it's dynamic, and our feelings are dynamic. So, you know, we don't just stay in a feeling for a really long period of time, or we don't usually. Our feelings are quite fluid. We tend to kind of move between different feelings, and also the intensity of those feelings will change over time. And so video is a great way of capturing what's happening, what happens before a feeling is felt, and also kind of what we see during that feeling, and then also maybe what happens that might take a person or a character into a new feeling. So video also is a great way of being able to put things in a social context. You can see what else is going on around as well. So I really like the use of video for teaching emotions. Overlearning. So overlearning links to that rehearsal. So overlearning is really important, particularly if the child in question has got a significant learning disability. Repetition is key for a new skill to be really embedded. So providing lots of opportunities to rehearse, and this is where having that extra time also comes into play. If you've got the luxury of time and space, it's okay, isn't it, to allow lots of overlearning, so lots of going over and over. If you're just focusing on that one child and that one child's needs, and if we've not quite grasped a particular feeling or emotion that you're teaching, then that's really helpful, because you don't have to move on. You can just keep going and you can learn in different ways until it's embedded. Whereas in a classroom or a group of children who have all got slightly different needs and are learning at different paces, it can be difficult to give the child who needs more opportunities for rehearsal enough time for overlearning until it's embedded, which again goes back to the video where Ian was sharing around that point. And then I kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, but our feelings, our emotions are very much linked to social situations. Quite often our responses to other people, things people have done, maybe things people have said, things that are going on in our environment, often involving people. So emotions are very much linked to our social skills. It's kind of part of those social skills. So again, that's teaching social skills, rehearsing, and then applying with peers is really, really helpful. I came across a program quite a number of years ago, and it's not something that's available anymore, but the concepts obviously still remain, and it was about using playtimes and playground games as a way of and bringing them into like the classroom as a real teaching opportunity, and then playing a game. So teaching the children how to play a game. So lots of playground games that have kind of got lost over time, and actually teaching them, and then they would kind of pause or freeze at certain times during the game, and then kind of notice or spot things that were going on. So how different people might have been feeling, or something that someone might have done, and then the response to other children who were playing the game, and using it as a really great way of learning and also rehearsing those skills. And then the application of those social skills would then back out in the playground when it was playtime. Applying that to the home learning situation, application, when we're allowed, of course, would be perhaps going to the local park. Whereas rehearsal might be with members of the immediate family, or close friends who you're able to see more frequently. Okay, so there's just a few ideas. Video slides available to view later on, will they be? Yes, they will. So this live will stay in the group. So for as long as the group is available, basically this video will be here.
I will add the slide. It's a bit funny about documents, but there is a way to do it. So I can't quite remember how I've done it before, but we will make sure we find a way to get the slides to you. Just wanted to pick up on a comment. A couple of comments. The person who was mentioning about sensory processing, and can it be a delay? And yes, it could be a delay, but also if we think about sensory processing in terms of a child either under or oversensitive, you might find you've got a combination of the either there's a bit of undersensitivity, so that it's quite sudden when the child experiences whatever they're feeling, whether it's hunger or needing to go to the toilet or whatever, and therefore it's quite an overwhelming feeling and a bit of a panic. Similarly, it could be that they're oversensitive, but there's a delay in them being able to communicate that, so that by the time they are able to communicate it to you, those sensory feelings have got really, really strong. So that's possibly why that's happening. And again, using the techniques Karen's talked about, but particularly thinking visually and supporting the child to understand what they're feeling physically, and then being able to communicate that. Those two sort of quite key stages in being able to support a child in managing those sensory processing issues. I think we've come to the end of the presentation, but we've got a couple of resources here. Just before we go through these, Karen, somebody was asking about children who have particularly complex needs. So maybe when there's a combination of, for example, autism and ADHD as well as Down syndrome. There's two things to think about. I know the person was asking very specifically about any particular speech and language programs because the child's language is quite severely delayed. I'm sure, Karen, you can talk about a couple, but I wanted to mention something called SCERTS, which is SCERTS, and it's for children who are on the autistic spectrum, and it really breaks down the different aspects of autism, one of which obviously is those social communication skills, and it really breaks it down into very, very small steps, and is a program that can be used alongside other programs. It's more of an assessment and monitoring approach, and it's been developed by professionals who've had over 30 years experience in the field, so it's a really fantastic program to have a look at, and I think would work quite well if a child has particularly complex needs. Again, something that's really common with autism, ADHD, and as I mentioned at the start, Down syndrome, is difficulties with executive functioning, and it may well be that is an area to look at in terms of finding a way to support your child to be able to manage their feelings, their emotions, be able to plan what they want to say and how they're going to say it. And if they haven't got the words to do it, to find a way to do that visually. So Karen, I don't know if there's any particular programs you would recommend for a child who's got complex needs, but very, very limited language skills.
I was just going to say, I can't see your name, sorry, at the moment, but I can when I go back into the group after we've finished. If you send a message, like a direct message, and maybe if we talk things through a little bit more, and that will help me to give kind of the most useful suggestions so that it's a little bit more bespoke to your son rather than me kind of reeling off different kind of thoughts now.
Yeah, there are so many programs out there, and sometimes it's about working out what's the best one to use at that particular time, which is going to be the main area to focus on. So it's all about understanding, isn't it? Understanding the individual child and what their needs are. So we just have a look at the resources. We've got a course that I've put on here. So the wonderful Ian, who you heard speaking earlier, he runs a company called Studio TV, which delivers online training for schools. Lots of fantastic material, lots of fantastic courses, including tons of free stuff. And there is a really brilliant free course called What is Down Syndrome? And when you look at the slide handout later on, you'll be able to see it's a clickable link, or you can just search Studio TV. I really, really enjoyed this course. I learned something new, and I think there's something there for everybody, whether you're a parent, an educator, new to Down syndrome, or been experienced in the field for a while. It was a combination of lots of really good refresher tips, but also some really interesting information and statistics as well. So I really recommend taking a look at that free course. And then the Down Syndrome Association has lots of really useful resources on emotional well-being. I mentioned earlier about children with Down syndrome, whilst they might be delayed compared to their peers, they are still able to learn to recognise emotions in themselves and others, and to be able to manage them. Very much alongside those communication skills is going to be what supports them in that. But if you're wanting to teach your child some strategies for how they can recognise when they're feeling a bit particularly upset or distressed or starting to get a bit worried, and thinking about how their body feels and what to do with that, then there's some lovely resources on the Down Syndrome Association. And then Karen, I think you should talk about the last wonderful resource.
So the final resource is a link to a book that I've written and published, and it covers not just emotions and feelings. It's essentially communication for children with Down syndrome all the way through the primary years, so from kind of 3 to 11. And I published it this year in time for Down syndrome awareness back in March. So that is available. I've got it here. If you wanted to have a click on the link and have a look more about that. That's why I've written it, to share information with the people who need it.
Okay.
Oh, so thank you so much to those of you who've joined us live this evening, and also to those of you who will be watching on replay. It's been an absolute pleasure. I've loved coming together again with you, Hannah. We've come together previously for a live in Hannah's group, which I think is the one that's your group there, isn't it? Mentioned there on the slide, Hannah.
Top tips for learning and child development. So
yeah,
you're very welcome to join that group as well. But it's always great working together with other professionals and being able to pull together all the information and knowledge that we're gathering over the years and share it out, and just hope that you have found this talk useful, and thank you for joining us. And I know that there's been a few more comments, and we will have a look at them. Someone's recommended something called smile therapy, so thank you very much. And we will have a look at all the other questions, and we will respond to them in the comments.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.
Good night.